A widowed millionaire sees two children kneeling by his wife's coffin during the funeral service. But when he hears their prayer, he freezes and starts to cry. The oppressive silence of the chapel was broken only by the occasional sound of sniffles and the muffled whispers of condolences. Jack Thornton, imposing in his custom-tailored black suit, stood like a statue in front of the polished mahogany coffin. His eyes, usually sharp and calculating, were now dull and distant, fixed on the serene face of Sarah, his wife of 3 decades. Sarah's death had been as sudden as it was unexpected. A cerebral aneurysm, the doctors said. One moment she was laughing over breakfast, her eyes gleaming with that sparkle Jack loved so much. The next moment, she was gone, taking with her the only genuine warmth in Jack's meticulously constructed life. While the guests moved like silent shadows around the chapel, Jack observed them with an almost clinical detachment. Top-level executives, business partners, prominent figures in society, all there to pay their last respects. But for Jack, their presence felt more like a social obligation than a true expression of mourning. His gaze roamed over the well-dressed crowd, noting the rehearsed expressions of sorrow, the firm handshakes exchanged in corners, and the furtive glances in his direction. Jack knew this world, this game of appearances and connections. He had mastered it over decades, building an empire that made him one of the richest and most influential men in the country. But now, standing before Sarah's lifeless body, all of that felt empty, meaningless. Loneliness hit him like an overwhelming wave, threatening to consume him completely. Sarah had been his safe harbor, his anchor in a world of boundless ambitions and fierce rivalries. With her, he could just be Jack, not the feared business magnate his reputation suggested. A sudden movement at the chapel entrance caught his attention, momentarily pulling him out of his somber thoughts. 2 small figures slipped inside, as silent as shadows. Jack blinked, certain his eyes were deceiving him. They were children. 2 ragged children who looked woefully out of place amid the luxury and solemnity of the funeral. The girl, who couldn't have been more than 5 years old, clutched the hand of a boy even younger. Their hair was messy, their clothes worn and stained. The contrast with the impeccably dressed attendees couldn't have been more striking. Jack felt the shocked stares of the guests turn toward the little intruders. He noticed someone begin to move, likely about to call security to remove the children. But before anyone could act, the scene took an even more surprising turn. With a determination that defied their frail appearance, the children walked down the center aisle. Their steps were hesitant but resolute, their eyes fixed on the coffin ahead. Silence in the chapel became absolute, as though everyone collectively held their breath. Reaching the coffin, the 2 children knelt in perfect unison. The older girl closed her eyes, her small hands coming together in prayer. The boy, clearly following his sister's lead, did the same, though his eyes stayed open, shifting between Sarah's serene face and the astonished faces around him. Jack, who had watched the scene with a mix of confusion and fascination, took a step forward, almost instinctively. That was when he heard the girl's voice, trembling but clear. "Dear Aunt Sarah," she began, her childish voice laden with an emotion that made Jack's heart clench. "Thank you for all the kindness you gave us, for the tasty sandwiches you always brought, for the warm clothes in winter, and for the hugs that made us feel safe." Jack's world seemed to spin. Aunt Sarah. His Sarah? He looked around, expecting to see the same shock on everyone else's faces, but they looked just as perplexed as he was. The girl continued, her voice gaining strength. "Michael and I will miss your smiles and the stories you told us. I promise I'll take good care of him, just like you taught me." Jack felt his legs weaken. He leaned on the coffin, his gaze darting between Sarah's serene face and the 2 kneeling children. How was this possible? Sarah had never mentioned these children. She had never spoken about visiting poor neighborhoods or performing personal acts of charity. Little Michael, apparently emboldened by his sister, added in his tiny voice, "Aunt Sarah, I liked it when you tickled my tummy. Are you going to tickle the angels now?" It was as though a dam burst inside Jack. The tears he had fought so hard to contain since Sarah's death announcement now flowed freely. He couldn't stop looking at the children, at their innocent faces marked by both sadness and gratitude. Meanwhile, whispers began to spread through the chapel. Who were these children? How did they know Sarah? Why did no one else know about them? Jack could feel the curious stares and the speculations starting to form, but none of that mattered at the moment. All Jack could think about was Sarah, her secretive smile when she left for her personal appointments, the times he found her frowning at some inexplicable stain on her expensive clothes. How many secrets had his wife kept? How many lives had she touched without his knowledge? The children finished their impromptu prayer and stood up. The girl, Emily, as Jack now knew, looked directly at him. Her big, expressive eyes seemed far wiser than her years. For a moment, Jack had the strange feeling that she could see right through him, perceiving the confusion and pain he was trying so hard to hide. "Are you Uncle Jack?" she asked, her small voice clear in the silent chapel. "Aunt Sarah talked a lot about you. She said you had a big heart, but sometimes you forgot to use it." Those words hit Jack like a punch to the gut. He found himself unable to respond, his throat tight with emotion. Emily, apparently taking his silence as confirmation, went on. "She said one day we would meet you. That you'd like us, even if it took you a while to realize it." Jack dropped to his knees, now at the children's eye level. His world had been turned upside down. Everything he thought he knew about Sarah, about their life together, was being rewritten right before his eyes. Michael, the younger boy, approached Jack with the guileless innocence of a 3-year-old. Without hesitation, he reached out and touched Jack's face, his tiny fingers tracing the path of tears. "Don't cry, Uncle Jack," he said, his childish voice full of concern. Aunt Sarah didn't like it when people were sad. That simple gesture, that pure display of empathy, was too much for Jack. He pulled both children into a tight embrace, sobbing openly now. He no longer cared about appearances or what others might think. In that moment, he was just a grieving man, discovering an entirely new side of the woman he had loved for so many years. The guests watched the scene with a mixture of shock and emotion. Some began to cry as well, moved by this unexpected display of vulnerability from the powerful Jack Thornton. As he embraced Emily and Michael, Jack felt something shift inside him. It was as though a door he hadn't known existed had opened. The pain of losing Sarah was still there, sharp and fierce. But now there was something else, a sense of purpose, a connection to something bigger than himself. Slowly, Jack pulled away, looking into the eyes of Emily and Michael. Would you like to tell me more about Aunt Sarah?" he asked, his voice husky with emotion. Emily nodded, a small smile brightening her sad face. "Aunt Sarah used to say, 'The best stories are the ones we live, not just the ones we tell.' She lived a lot of beautiful stories, Uncle Jack." In that moment, in front of his wife's coffin and with 2 children he had just met in his arms, Jack Thornton made a silent promise. He would honor Sarah's memory, not just by maintaining his business empire, but by uncovering and continuing the secret work she had done. Sarah Thornton's funeral, which had begun as a solemn and formal event, turned into something far deeper and more meaningful. And for Jack, it was the start of a journey that would change his life forever. As he stood up, still holding Emily and Michael's hands, Jack looked once more at Sarah's serene face. For the first time since her death, he felt a flicker of peace. Sarah might be gone, but her legacy of love and compassion lived on. Now it was up to him to discover and honor that legacy. The chapter ends with Jack, Emily, and Michael hand in hand before the coffin, a powerful image of unlikely unity and a preview of a new phase in everyone's life. The guests, still shocked, began to disperse, murmuring among themselves about what they had just witnessed. And Jack, for the first time in days, felt a renewed sense of purpose, even in the midst of his grief. Sarah's funeral was over, but for Jack Thornton, a new journey was just beginning. As the last guests left, throwing curious looks at the 2 ragged children now clinging to his hands, Jack found himself immersed in a whirlwind of conflicting emotions and thoughts. Emily, the 5-year-old girl, looked up, her big brown eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and expectation. "What happens now, Uncle Jack?" she asked, her small voice firm. Jack swallowed hard, realizing he didn't have a ready answer. His meticulously organized and controlled world had been turned upside down in a matter of minutes. He glanced at Michael, the 3-year-old boy who was now idly fiddling with a loose button on his worn jacket. "Now," Jack began, surprised by the determination in his own voice, "now you come with me." The words came out before he could really think of the implications, but as he said them, Jack felt it was the right thing to do. Sarah had cared for these children in secret. Now it was his turn to honor that commitment. As Jack led Emily and Michael out of the chapel, memories began to flood his mind. Flashbacks of Sarah, always so elegant and composed, blended with newly formed images of his wife in a completely different setting. Sarah Thornton adjusted the scarf covering her usually impeccable blonde hair and looked around the narrow, run-down alley. The contrast between her designer coat and the peeling walls was striking, but Sarah didn't care about appearances here. She knocked softly on the worn wooden door. After a few moments, the door opened, revealing the tired but hopeful face of a middle-aged woman. "Mrs. Thornton," the woman whispered, a mix of reverence and gratitude in her voice. "Thank you for coming. The kids, they've been so excited." Sarah smiled as she entered the small apartment. The smell of mildew and reheated food hit her, but she barely noticed. Her eyes were fixed on the 2 small figures peeking out from behind a tattered couch. "Aunt Sarah!" Emily shouted, running to wrap her arms around Sarah's legs. Michael, still unsteady on his toddler feet, followed close behind with arms outstretched. Sarah knelt down, hugging both children tightly. "My darlings," she murmured, tears shining in her eyes. "How are you doing? Are you eating well? Sleeping well?" As the children chattered excitedly about their days, the older woman watched with a mixture of admiration and sadness. "I don't know what we'd do without you," she said softly. Ever since she left, it's been so hard." Sarah stood, holding Emily and Michael by the hands. "Mrs. Gomez, please, there's no need to thank me. It's the least I can do." She paused, a flicker of guilt crossing her face. "I just wish I could do more. Bring them to—" "Mrs. Gomez shook her head. "You're already doing more than you should. I know it's not easy with your position, your husband." Sarah sighed. "Jack is a good man," she said, more to herself than to Mrs. Gomez. He just needs time to see beyond the business world. One day I'm sure he'll understand." Jack blinked, returning to the present. He was standing beside his limousine, with Emily and Michael staring at the luxurious vehicle in awe. "Is it a magic car, Uncle Jack?" Michael asked, his eyes wide. Jack couldn't hold back a small smile. "No, Michael, it's just a big, comfortable car. Come on, get in. We're going home." As the driver, visibly puzzled by the presence of the children, opened the door, Jack felt his phone vibrate. It was his lawyer, probably already informed about what had transpired at the funeral. Jack ignored the call. There would be time for explanations and legal matters later. Right now, his priority was Emily and Michael. The ride to the Thornton mansion felt surreal. Jack watched the children alternate between fascination at the limousine's luxuries and moments of deep sadness, clearly thinking of Sarah. Emily, especially, seemed to carry a burden beyond her years, constantly checking on Michael, adjusting his worn clothing, whispering words of comfort. When the limousine finally passed through the imposing gates of the Thornton estate, Jack felt a mix of relief and apprehension. How would he explain this to his family? How would he care for 2 small children? What had Sarah expected him to do? The mansion, an imposing 3-story structure with Greek columns and meticulously groomed gardens, looked even more grand and intimidating through the children's eyes. Emily and Michael gaped as they got out of the car, clinging to each other in awe. "Uncle Jack," Emily whispered, her voice trembling, "is this where you live?" Jack nodded, suddenly aware of how his life must look to children who had likely never seen anything beyond their impoverished neighborhood. "Yes, Emily. And now, for a while, it's where you'll live too." No sooner had he spoken those words than the front door opened, revealing Amanda, Jack's younger sister. Her face, usually composed, showed a mixture of confusion and disapproval. "Jack," she began, descending the front steps, What's going on? Who are these children? Jack took a deep breath, bracing himself for what would undoubtedly be a difficult conversation. Amanda, these are Emily and Michael. They are children Sarah cared for. They'll be staying with us for a while. The shock on Amanda's face was evident. Cared for, Jack? What are you talking about? Sarah never mentioned. I know, Jack interrupted, his voice firmer than he felt inside. There's so much we didn't know about Sarah, but now isn't the time for that. These children just lost someone very important to them. They need a place to stay, and this is their place now. Amanda opened her mouth to protest, but something in Jack's expression stopped her. She looked at Emily and Michael, noticing their frightened eyes and threadbare clothes. Her features softened slightly. Well, she said finally, I suppose we should bring them inside. They look like they need a bath and clean clothes. Jack nodded, grateful for his sister's small concession. He turned to the children, holding out his hands. Come on, Emily, Michael. Let's go in and get you settled. As they walked through the grand entrance hall, with its marble floors and crystal chandeliers, Jack couldn't help noticing the stark contrast between the luxury around him and the two small figures clinging to his hands. It was a vivid reminder of the two worlds Sarah had connected, and now it was up to him to do the same. The hours that followed were a whirlwind of activity. Amanda, overcoming her initial shock, took charge, organizing baths, finding borrowed clothes from relatives' children who occasionally visited, and preparing a makeshift meal in the mansion's kitchen. Jack looked on, feeling both grateful for his sister's efficiency and completely out of his depth. He was a master in boardrooms and high-level negotiations, but here, confronted with two frightened and hungry children, he felt utterly lost. During dinner, while Emily and Michael devoured sandwiches as if they'd never seen food before, the reality of the situation finally hit him. These weren't just kids Sarah occasionally helped. Based on what Emily had said at the funeral and how they spoke of Aunt Sarah, it was clear his wife's involvement went far beyond simple charity. Emily, Jack began hesitantly, could you tell me a little more about how you met Aunt Sarah? Emily swallowed a big bite of her sandwich, tears filling her eyes at the mention of Sarah. It was after Mommy left, she said quietly. Grandma Maria was very sad, and there wasn't money for food. Aunt Sarah showed up one day with bags full of good stuff. She said she was our guardian angel. Michael, his face smeared with jelly, added, Aunt Sarah told pretty stories about princesses and dragons and knights. Jack felt a lump in his throat. Sarah had always had a soft spot for fairy tales, something he used to think was a bit silly for a woman of her stature. Now he saw the power of those stories through these children's eyes. And did she visit you often? Jack asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Emily nodded vigorously. Every week, sometimes twice. She brought food, clothes, and toys too. Sometimes she took us to the park. Jack closed his eyes for a moment, remembering those Saturday afternoons when Sarah said she was going shopping or meeting friends. How many of those afternoons had she spent with Emily and Michael? How had he not noticed? Night fell, and it soon became clear the children were exhausted. The day had been emotionally draining for everyone, but especially for Emily and Michael. Jack led them to one of the guest rooms, large enough to comfortably accommodate the two of them. While helping Emily settle into the enormous bed, Jack noticed the wonder in her eyes at the silk sheets and plush pillows. It's like sleeping on a cloud, Uncle Jack, she whispered, her eyes already heavy with sleep. Michael, however, seemed a bit uneasy. He clung to Jack, reluctant to let go of his hand. Stay here, Uncle Jack, he pleaded, his big eyes fearful in the dim light. Jack hesitated. He wasn't used to dealing with children, let alone comforting them at bedtime. But something in Michael's gaze touched him deeply. Without overthinking, he sat on the edge of the bed. Okay, Michael, I'll stay until you fall asleep, he promised, surprised by the tenderness in his own voice. Emily scooted closer, hugging her younger brother. Don't worry, Mikey, we're safe here. Aunt Sarah said Uncle Jack would take care of us, remember? Emily's words hit Jack like a punch to the stomach. Sarah had talked about him to these children. She trusted that he would care for them. The weight of this unexpected legacy pressed down on his shoulders. As the children drifted off, Jack remained seated, lost in thought. His life had changed irrevocably in the past 24 hours. He had lost Sarah, discovered a completely unknown side of his wife, and now found himself responsible for 2 children he barely knew. When he was certain Emily and Michael were deeply asleep, Jack slipped out of the room. In the hallway, he found Amanda waiting with a worried expression. "Jack," she began in a hushed tone, "we need to talk. What are you thinking? We can't just adopt 2 kids off the street." Jack raised his hand to silence his sister. "They're not street kids, Amanda. They're children Sarah loved, and for now, they stay." Amanda frowned. "But Jack, think about the legal implications and the media. What will your shareholders say? This could affect the business." "Enough!" Jack snapped, louder than he intended. He paused, glancing at the closed door behind which Emily and Michael slept, then continued more quietly. "Amanda, I understand your concerns, but not now. Tomorrow we'll deal with lawyers, the press, everything, but tonight, just let me process this, okay?" Amanda looked like she wanted to argue, but something in her brother's exhausted expression made her back off. "All right, Jack, but tomorrow we need a plan." After Amanda left, Jack found himself wandering the mansion's corridors, his footsteps echoing in the silent night. He stopped outside Sarah's office, a room he rarely entered, respecting his wife's personal space. With a deep breath, he turned the handle and entered. The soft scent of Sarah lingered in the air, making his heart tighten. His eyes scanned the bookshelves, framed photos, and little decorative items Sarah had collected on her travels. Each object seemed to tell a story, one he now realized he didn't fully know. Jack sat in Sarah's chair, running his fingers over the polished surface of the desk. That was when he noticed a small leather-bound notebook, partially hidden beneath some papers. Curious, he picked it up and opened it. Sarah's elegant handwriting filled the pages. They weren't business notes or social commitments as he expected. They were stories, fairy tales, some familiar, others apparently original. In the margins were little doodles and notes. "Emily loved the brave princess. Tell Michael about the friendly dragon." Tears blurred Jack's vision as he flipped through the notebook. Each page revealed more of Sarah's generous heart, of her secret life dedicated to bringing joy and hope to 2 children in need. On the last page, a recent entry caught his eye. "Dear Jack, if you're reading this, something must have happened to me. I know you must be confused and maybe even hurt that I kept Emily and Michael a secret, but, my love, I know you. I know your heart, even if sometimes you hide it from yourself. These children need you now, and perhaps you need them too. They have so much to teach about unconditional love, about finding joy in the little things. I trust you to take care of them, to show them the wonderful man I know you are. Be patient, Jack, with them and with yourself. Love always finds a way. With all my heart, Sarah." Jack closed the notebook, pressing it against his chest. Sarah's words echoed in his mind, challenging him, encouraging him. In that moment, sitting in his late wife's office, surrounded by memories and facing an uncertain future, Jack Thornton made a decision. He would honor Sarah's wish. He would care for Emily and Michael, no matter what challenges lay ahead. With new resolve, he stood and walked to the room where the children slept. Gently, he opened the door and watched them. Emily and Michael were curled up together, their faces peaceful in sleep, unaware of the dramatic changes in their lives. "I promise, Sarah," Jack whispered into the darkness. "I'll take care of them. I'll learn to be the man you always knew I could be." As he quietly closed the door, Jack knew the days ahead would be challenging. There would be legal issues, explanations to give, new routines to establish. But for the first time since Sarah's death, he felt a spark of hope. The sun was starting to rise, painting the sky in soft shades of pink and gold. A new day was dawning, bringing the beginning of a journey Jack never could have imagined. With Sarah's notebook clutched in his hands and the promise made in his heart, he braced himself for whatever the future might bring. The chapter ends with Jack returning to his own room, exhausted but resolute. He places Sarah's notebook on the bedside table and, for the first time in days, falls asleep with a gentle smile on his lips, dreaming of brave princesses, friendly dragons, and the unconditional love that has the power to transform lives. In the weeks following Emily and Michael's arrival at the Thornton mansion, Jack found himself juggling his business responsibilities and his new role as the children's guardian. As he struggled to establish a routine and tackle the daily challenges of caring for two small kids, a growing restlessness gnawed at him. There were so many unanswered questions about Emily and Michael's past, and about Sarah's involvement in their lives. Determined to uncover more, Jack decided to hire a private investigator. After a careful selection process, he chose Elena Rodriguez, a former police detective known for her discretion and efficiency. "I want to know everything," Jack instructed Elena in his office, away from the children's curious ears. "Where they came from, who their parents are, how Sarah found them. But most importantly, I want to make sure they're safe here with me." Elena nodded, her keen eyes assessing Jack. "Understood, Mr. Thornton. I'll conduct a thorough but discreet investigation. We don't want to alarm the kids or draw unwanted attention." While Elena began her investigation, Jack continued his own search for answers at home. One afternoon, while the children played in the garden under the watchful eye of the newly hired nanny, he decided to explore Sarah's office more thoroughly. During this search, Jack found Sarah's diary, hidden in a false-bottomed desk drawer. With trembling hands, he opened the leather-bound book, immediately recognizing his wife's elegant handwriting. The first entries dated back almost 2 years, describing Sarah's initial encounter with Emily and Michael. "Today I saw the true meaning of resilience. Two little souls, abandoned by fate, yet with an unquenchable light in their eyes. Emily, so protective of her little brother. Michael, I can't just ignore them, I have to do something." As Jack turned the pages, Sarah's plan unfolded before his eyes. She not only provided food and clothes, but was actively involved in the children's education and emotional well-being. Emily has a natural talent for drawing. Her sketches are incredible for someone so young. I brought her some colored pencils today. Her eyes sparkled like stars. Michael's, on the other hand, seems to have a musical ear. He was tapping out a complex rhythm on an old tin can. "I need to find a way to nurture these talents." Jack paused, recalling how Emily often drew on any scrap of paper she could find, and how Michael always seemed to be humming or creating rhythms with random objects around the house. Sarah had noticed these gifts long before he had. Continuing to read, Jack discovered Sarah had ambitious plans for the children's future. "I spoke to my lawyer today. I'm setting up a trust fund for Emily and Michael. I can't adopt them legally without raising questions, but I can secure their financial future." Jack wouldn't understand now, but someday, I hope he'll see how special these kids are. Tears blurred Jack's vision. Sarah had planned everything, thinking about the children's future, even as he remained unaware of their existence. Memories of times with Sarah began flooding his mind, taking on new meaning in light of these revelations. The Saturday afternoon she spent shopping. The mysterious phone calls she took in private, the time she seemed distracted during business dinners, all of it made sense now. Jack recalled one night in particular, about a year ago, when Sarah came home later than usual, her eyes red from crying. "What's wrong, dear?" he had asked, concerned. Sarah offered a sad smile. "Sometimes, Jack, the world can be so unfair to the innocent, but there's also so much kindness, so much hope. I just wish you could see what I see." At the time, he had attributed her emotional state to some charity event she often attended. Now he realized it likely had everything to do with Emily and Michael. As Jack pondered these newly contextualized memories, his phone rang. It was Elena. "Mr. Thornton, I have some preliminary information about the children," she said, her tone professional but tinged with concern. "I managed to trace their background to a neighborhood on the east side of the city. Their grandmother, Maria Gomez, has been their legal guardian since the children's mother disappeared about 3 years ago." Jack felt a knot in his stomach. "And their father?" "We don't have concrete information about him yet," Elena replied, "but there's something else you should know. It appears that the children's mother, Lisa Gomez, was recently spotted in town." Jack's heart raced. The possibility that the children's biological parents could reappear had never even crossed his mind. "What does that mean, Eleanor?" he asked, his voice tense. "So far, nothing concrete," she assured him. "But I think we should be prepared for the possibility that she may want to make contact with the kids. After hanging up, Jack sat in silence, Sarah's diary still in his lap. The day's revelations weighed heavily on him. On one hand, he was amazed by the depth of Sarah's love and dedication to Emily and Michael. On the other, the prospect of their biological parents' potential return filled him with an apprehension he hadn't expected to feel. Looking out the window, Jack saw Emily and Michael playing in the garden, their laughter echoing across the estate. In just a few weeks, these children had become a vital part of his life, filling a void he hadn't realized was there. With a deep sigh, Jack stood, determined to protect and care for Emily and Michael no matter what the future held. He had made a promise to Sarah, and now more than ever, he was committed to keeping it. The weeks turned into months, and life at the Thornton mansion settled into a new rhythm. Jack, Emily, and Michael were slowly adjusting to their new reality, forming a family dynamic that, while unconventional, brought a sense of comfort and belonging to all. On a sunny Saturday morning, Jack was in the garden, watching Emily draw, while Michael played with a toy drum set he had recently bought. The children's laughter mixed with birdsong, creating a symphony that warmed Jack's heart. It was in that moment of peace that his phone rang, bringing news that would shake the fragile balance they had built. "Jack, we have a problem," came the tense voice of his press secretary, David Tease, on the other end of the line. "Robert Hawthorne just gave an interview. He talked about the children." Jack felt the blood run cold in his veins. Robert Hawthorne was his longtime business rival, known for his ruthless tactics and lack of scruples. "What exactly did he say, David?" "He insinuated there's something suspicious about your sudden adoption of 2 street kids," David explained, frustration clear in his voice. "He's suggesting it's a PR stunt or something worse." Jack closed his eyes, feeling a wave of anger and worry. "Send me the details, I'll handle this." Ending the call, Jack looked at Emily and Michael, his heart tightening. How could he protect them from this kind of maliciousness? In the days that followed, the situation deteriorated rapidly. The sensationalist press latched onto the story, wildly speculating about Jack's motives. Headlines like "Business Tycoon in Adoption Scandal" and "Jack Thornton's Secret Children" appeared in tabloids and gossip sites. The pressure peaked when Jack received a call from the Child Services Department. "Mr. Thornton, we've received complaints regarding the children in your care. We need to schedule a visit to assess the environment." Jack felt a surge of panic. The idea of losing Emily and Michael was unbearable. He knew he had to act quickly to protect not just his reputation, but more importantly, the children who had become so precious to him. That night, after putting the kids to bed, Jack met with his legal and PR teams. The discussion was heated, with differing opinions on how to proceed. "You need to distance yourself from the children, Jack," argued one of his lawyers, "at least temporarily. It's the only way to calm this storm." Jack shook his head emphatically. "No, absolutely not. I promised Sarah I would look after them, and that's exactly what I'm going to do." After hours of debate, Jack made his decision. He would face the accusations head-on, telling his story and Sarah's to the world. The next morning, Jack called a press conference. Standing before a crowd of journalists, cameras and microphones, he took a deep breath and began, "A few months ago, I lost my beloved wife, Sarah. On the day of her funeral, I discovered a side of her I never knew, a side full of compassion and dedication to 2 wonderful children, Emily and Michael. Sarah had cared for them in secret, planning their future and filling their lives with love." Jack paused, his voice thick with emotion. "When I met Emily and Michael, I saw in them the legacy of Sarah's love. I decided to honor that legacy by caring for them as if they were my own. This was not a business decision or a PR stunt. It was a decision of the heart." He went on to detail how Sarah had met the children, her plans to help them, and how, in just a few months, Emily and Michael had transformed his life. "I know many question my motives," Jack concluded, his voice firm. "But I invite anyone who doubts to spend a day with us. See for yourselves the love and joy these children have brought to our home. Emily and Michael are not a burden or a strategy. They are a blessing, and I am committed to giving them all the love and support they deserve." The press conference had an immediate impact. Jack's honesty and emotion touched many hearts, changing the narrative overnight. Messages of support began flooding social media and the Thornton Company headquarters. In the days that followed, Jack greeted the social workers with confidence. He guided them through the mansion, showing them the children's rooms, filled with toys and drawings. Emily and Michael, initially shy, soon opened up, telling the visitors about their days with Uncle Jack. The investigation concluded the children were well cared for and happy. Although the situation was unconventional, it was clear Jack was providing a loving, stable home. With the media storm calming down, Jack was able to fully focus on Emily and Michael again. He reduced his hours at the office, prioritizing time with the children. Together, they established new routines. Mornings began with family breakfasts, something Jack hadn't done in years. He discovered he loved hearing Emily excitedly recount her dreams, and Michael's attempts at jokes that rarely made sense, but always made him laugh. Jack became more actively involved in the children's education. He helped Emily with her homework, marveling at her curiosity and thirst for knowledge. For Michael, he hired a music teacher, watching with pride as the boy blossomed in his lessons. Evenings were often spent in the garden, where Jack read stories to the kids, the same stories Sarah had written in her notebook. Sometimes Emily would ask to illustrate the scenes, and Jack was amazed by her talent. One particularly sunny Sunday, Jack decided to take the children to the local park, something he hadn't done since his own childhood. Watching Emily run across the playground and helping Michael climb the slide, Jack felt a wave of joy so unexpected it nearly overwhelmed him. "Look, Uncle Jack." "I'm flying," Michael yelled from the swing, his face lit with excitement. Jack laughed, gently pushing the swing. "You sure are, champ. You're the best flyer I've ever seen." Meanwhile, Emily came over, holding out a small bouquet of wildflowers she had gathered. "These are for you, Uncle Jack," she said shyly, "because you make us happy." In that moment, holding the flowers with Michael laughing in the background, Jack felt something shift within him. The pain of losing Sarah was still there, but now it was accompanied by a new sense of purpose and joy. Back at the mansion, Jack noticed how much had changed. The once silent halls now echoed with laughter and music. The walls, formerly adorned with expensive abstract art, now proudly displayed Emily's colorful drawings and Michael's scribbled attempts at writing. Jack realized he himself had changed. The ruthless executive, focused solely on business, was giving way to a more patient, compassionate man. He found himself smiling more often, laughing more easily, and finding delight in the simplest things: a well-done drawing, a new word learned, a spontaneous hug. One night, as he tucked the children into bed, Emily looked up at him with her big brown eyes. "Uncle Jack," she asked sleepily, "do you think Aunt Sarah is happy in heaven watching us?" Jack felt a lump in his throat. "I'm sure she is, sweetheart," he replied gently. "I think she's very, very happy." After turning off the lights and quietly closing the door, Jack paused in the hallway, gazing at a photo of Sarah. "Thank you," he whispered, gently touching her smiling face in the frame. "Thank you for showing me what really matters." That night, lying in his bed, Jack reflected on the past few months. The journey hadn't been easy, and he knew there would still be challenges ahead. The shadow of the children's past lingered, with unresolved questions about their biological parents. But for the first time in a long while, Jack felt truly at peace. Through Emily and Michael, he had rediscovered love, joy, and purpose. With a smile on his lips, Jack drifted off to sleep, eager for whatever the new day would bring: more laughter, more discoveries, and more precious moments with his new family. Early one morning, while a faint dawn light filtered into Jack's office, his phone rang. Elena Rodriguez's name appeared on the screen, making his heart race. The private investigator rarely called so early unless she had found something significant. "Mr. Thornton," Elena's voice was steady on the other end. "I've located Emily and Michael's biological parents." Jack felt the air leave his lungs. After months of searching, the truth was finally coming to light. "Tell me everything, Elena," he said, bracing himself. "Their names are Mary and John Alvarez," Elena began. "They didn't die, as was initially believed." In fact, they abandoned the children about 3 years ago, leaving them with their maternal grandmother, Maria Gomez. Jack closed his eyes, trying to process the information. Why did they do it? Elena hesitated briefly. Mr. Thornton, it's not a pretty story. Mary and John were in dire financial straits at the time. They both lost their jobs and, well, they developed substance abuse problems. It reached a point where they couldn't care for themselves, let alone 2 kids. Anger simmered inside Jack. How could anyone abandon such wonderful children? But he forced himself to remain calm, knowing there was more to hear. And where are they now? He asked, fearing the answer. Here in the city, Elena replied. They've spent the last 2 years in a rehabilitation program. They've been clean for 18 months, both have steady jobs, and they want to reconnect with the kids. Jack felt as if the ground had disappeared under his feet. Mary and John wanted back into Emily and Michael's lives. What would that mean for the children? For him? Do they know where the kids are? Jack asked, his voice tight. Not exactly, Elena explained. They returned looking for Maria Gomez, but learned she had passed away. Neighbors told them the children had been taken in by a wealthy, kind lady. They've been trying to track the kids down ever since. Jack thanked Elena for her work and ended the call, his mind a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. He walked to the window and watched Emily and Michael playing happily in the garden, unaware of the storm brewing. The moral dilemma before Jack was immense. On one hand, Emily and Michael had the right to know their biological parents, to understand their origins. On the other, they had endured enough trauma and abandonment already. Would it be fair to subject them to more uncertainty? Jack spent the following days in agony, weighing his options. He consulted child psychologists, lawyers, and even prayed to Sarah's spirit in his nighttime reflections. Finally, he decided he would be honest with the children and plan a supervised meeting with Mary and John. One calm afternoon, Jack gathered Emily and Michael in the living room. His heart ached as he saw the trust shining in their eyes, knowing he was about to rock their world once again. Emily, Michael, he began softly. Remember how we talked about families and how they can be different? Emily nodded solemnly, while Michael toyed distractedly with a small car. Well, Jack continued, choosing his words carefully, I found out something about your family. Your parents. They aren't gone like we thought. They're alive, and they'd really like to meet you. The silence that followed was deafening. Emily froze, her big brown eyes wide with shock. Michael, sensing the tension, stopped playing and looked between Jack and his sister in confusion. But Grandma Maria said, Emily began, her voice trembling. Jack knelt in front of her, taking her small hands in his. I know, sweetheart, your grandmother probably didn't know the whole truth. Sometimes adults make mistakes and hard choices. Your parents went through a very difficult time, but now they're better and want to be part of your lives again. They didn't want us before, Emily said, tears sliding down her cheeks. Why do they want us now? Jack's heart broke at the pain in Emily's voice. He pulled both children into a tight hug, feeling Michael start to cry, more from confusion than understanding. Sometimes people do wrong things when they're struggling, Jack explained gently. But that doesn't mean they didn't love you. Your parents made mistakes, but now they want to try to make things right. Over the next few days, Jack worked tirelessly to prepare the children and organize the meeting. He hired a child therapist to help Emily and Michael process their emotions and brace for what lay ahead. At last, the day of the meeting arrived. Jack chose a quiet park, a neutral space where everyone could feel comfortable. He arrived early with the children, Emily clutching his hand tightly while Michael held onto his leg. When Mary and John Alvarez showed up, Jack felt a wave of conflicting emotions. The couple looked nervous but determined. Mary, a petite woman with Emily's brown eyes, was visibly trembling. John, tall and lean, with Michael's dark hair, wore a serious expression, though his eyes shone with anticipation. Emily, Michael, Jack said softly, these are Mary and John, your parents. The moment that followed was tense and emotional. Emily studied the couple with a mix of fear and curiosity, while Michael hid behind Jack's legs, peeking out timidly. Mary spoke first, her voice thick with emotion. Hello, my loves. You've grown so much." Emily took a hesitant step forward. Are you really our mum?" Mary nodded, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, sweetheart. It's me. And I'm so sorry I left." John knelt down to the children's level. "We know we hurt you," he said, his voice rough. "We understand if you're angry or scared, but we really want to be part of your lives again, if you'll let us." Michael, encouraged by John's gentle tone, took a tiny step out from behind Jack. "Do you like cars?" he asked timidly, holding out his favorite toy. John smiled, his eyes lighting up. "I love cars. Can you show me how yours works?" As Michael cautiously moved closer to John, Emily stayed at Jack's side, watching the scene with wary eyes. "It's okay," Jack whispered to her. "I'm here with you. We can take it slow." The rest of the afternoon was filled with both awkward and heartwarming moments. Mary and John shared stories of the children's early childhood, showing photos they had kept all those years. Emily and Michael fluctuated between curiosity and caution, sometimes moving toward their parents, at other times seeking the familiar comfort of Jack. Jack watched the interactions closely, his heart heavy but hopeful. He could see genuine remorse in Mary and John's eyes, a sincere desire to reconnect with their kids. At the same time, he noticed how Emily and Michael, despite initial fear, seemed drawn to their parents, as though a part of them had always known something was missing. As the sun began to set, signaling the end of the visit, Jack felt a decision crystallize in his heart. He would support the gradual reconnection of this family while remaining a constant support figure for Emily and Michael. "It was nice to meet you," Jack said to Mary and John as they prepared to leave. "If you agree, I'd like to arrange more visits like this. We can go slowly at the children's pace." Mary and John readily agreed, gratitude evident on their faces. "Mr. Thornton," Mary said, her voice trembling, "we can't thank you enough for everything you've done for our children. We know we don't deserve a second chance, but I promise we'll do everything we can to be the parents Emily and Michael deserve." Jack nodded, feeling a mixture of emotions. "They're amazing kids," he said. "They deserve all the love and support they can get." As Mary and John walked away, Jack knelt to face Emily and Michael. "How are you feeling?" he asked gently. Emily bit her lip, thoughtful. "They seem nice," she said slowly. "But you'll still be our Uncle Jack, right?" Jack felt his heart tighten with emotion. "Always," he promised, pulling both children into a hug. "I'll always be your Uncle Jack no matter what." Michael, tired from the day's emotions, yawned and snuggled into Jack's arms. "I liked John," he mumbled sleepily. "He makes funny car noises." Jack chuckled softly, picking Michael up and extending his free hand to Emily. As they walked back to the car, he reflected on the day's surprising events. The future was still uncertain. There would be challenges ahead, adjustments to make, emotions to process. But Jack was determined to navigate these unfamiliar waters with all the love and support he could offer. That night, after tucking the kids into bed, Jack sat alone in his office, staring at a photo of Sarah. "I hope I'm doing the right thing," he whispered to her smiling image. "Help me guide them through this, my love." And so, a new chapter began in the lives of Jack, Tata, Emily, and Michael, a chapter of healing, reconciliation, and redefining what it meant to be a family. Jack knew the road ahead would be complex, but he was ready to face each challenge, one day at a time, with love and determination. In the weeks following that first meeting between Emily, Michael, and their biological parents, Jack threw himself into developing a careful, comprehensive reintegration plan. He knew the process would be delicate and potentially emotional for everyone, especially the children. Jack started by consulting social workers and child psychologists. He wanted to ensure every step was taken with Emily and Michael's well-being in mind. After several meetings and discussions, Jack hired a dedicated team, Dr. Olivia Martinez, an experienced social worker, and Dr. Sarah Chen, a child therapist. "The most important thing is to maintain the children's emotional stability," Dr. Chen explained during one of the initial planning sessions. "We need to move at their pace, not ours." Jack nodded, absorbing every word. "How do we ensure that, Doctor?" Martinez spoke up. "I suggest starting with short, supervised visits, maybe once a week. We can gradually increase frequency and duration as the children become more comfortable." Following the professional's guidance, Jack laid out a detailed schedule for the next few months. The visits would begin as 1-hour sessions on Saturdays, always with Jack and a therapist present. Over time, they would assess progress and adjust the plan accordingly. In parallel with planning the visits, Jack also focused on ensuring Mary and John were stable enough to reconnect with their children. He knew financial struggles had contributed to their earlier abandonment and was determined to remove that obstacle. One sunny afternoon, Jack invited Mary and John to his office. The couple looked uneasy, clearly intimidated by the luxurious surroundings. "I want to make it clear, I'm committed to helping you rebuild your relationship with Emily and Michael," Jack began, his voice firm but gentle. "But to do that, we need to ensure you're both in a stable, healthy position." Mary and John exchanged apprehensive glances. "We understand," John said hesitantly. "We're working hard, saving every penny." Jack raised a hand, gently interrupting. "It's not just about money. I want to offer comprehensive support, financial, emotional, and practical. I'm willing to help with housing, continuing education, therapy, whatever it takes to help you become the best parents possible for Emily and Michael." Tears welled up in Mary's eyes. "Why would you do that for us? After everything?" "I'm not doing it for you," Jack replied honestly. "I'm doing it for Emily and Michael. They deserve parents who are healthy and stable, and if I can help make that happen, I will." In the months that followed, the reintegration plan started to take shape. The supervised visits became a weekly ritual. Jack watched with mixed emotions as Emily and Michael slowly let their guards down around Mary and John. At first, interactions were awkward and tense. Emily, in particular, kept her distance, but over time, guided by patient therapists, small moments of connection began to emerge. In one memorable visit, about 2 months into the process, Michael excitedly ran to show John a new trick he had learned with a ball. The genuine smile on the boy's face when his father praised him made Jack's heart twist with both happiness and a tinge of something he couldn't fully name. Visits gradually grew longer and more frequent. Saturday mornings turned into full Saturdays. Then Wednesday afternoons were added. Jack made sure his schedule was always clear for these times, determined to be there for Emily and Michael at every step. As he observed the slow but steady progress of reintegration, Jack began to reflect on the bigger picture. How many other families were going through similar situations? How many children could benefit from a structured, well-supported reunification program? One night, after putting Emily and Michael to bed, Jack sat in his office, an idea forming in his mind. He picked up a notepad and began sketching plans for a foundation, an organization that could provide resources, support, and guidance for families undergoing reunification. As he worked on his initial draft, Jack felt a sense of purpose that went beyond his personal situation with Emily and Michael. He envisioned a way to turn his experience into something that could help countless other families. The road ahead was still long and uncertain. Jack knew there would be challenges, setbacks, and difficult moments. But looking at the photos of Emily and Michael on his desk, alongside a picture of Sarah, he felt renewed determination. This wasn't just the end of a chapter. It was the beginning of something much bigger, a journey of healing, reconciliation, and hope extending far beyond the walls of the Thornton mansion. Fall had arrived, painting the trees on the Thornton estate in shades of red and gold. Jack watched through his office window as Emily and Michael played happily with Mary and John, their laughter ringing through the crisp autumn air. It was yet another supervised Saturday visit, and Jack couldn't help but smile at the progress everyone had made in recent months. However, his smile soon faded into a grimace when another wave of dizziness overtook him. He leaned against his desk, breathing deeply until the sensation passed. These spells had been happening more often in recent weeks, accompanied by persistent fatigue that seemed to sap his energy. "It must just be stress," he muttered to himself, trying to quell the growing worry. After all, the past few months had been emotionally intense and exhausting. But when Amanda, his sister, found him stumbling in the hallway a few days later, the concern in her eyes was unmistakable. "Jack, this isn't normal," she insisted, gripping his arm to steady him. "You need to see a doctor." Reluctantly, Jack agreed to a full checkup. He tried to convince himself it was just a precaution, that it was probably nothing serious. But a small voice in the back of his mind whispered that something was wrong. On the day of the tests, Jack found himself lying in an MRI machine, the rhythmic thumping of the equipment echoing in his ears. He closed his eyes, thinking of Emily and Michael, of Mary and John, of the foundation he was planning. There was so much to do, so many lives to impact. He couldn't afford to be sick now. A week later, Jack was sitting in Dr. Roberts' office, his longtime physician. The grave look on the doctor's face made Jack's stomach drop, even before any words were spoken. "Jack, the results are in," Dr. Roberts began, his voice gentle but serious. "Unfortunately, they're not good news." The world seemed to slow as the doctor explained. "A brain tumor, a delicate location, immediate treatment necessary, an uncertain prognosis." Jack listened to the words, but they felt distant, as though being said to someone else. His mind reeled, trying to process the enormity of what he was hearing. "How long?" he finally managed to ask, his voice rough. Dr. Roberts hesitated. "It's hard to say, Jack. With aggressive treatment, we could be looking at months, maybe a year or more. Without treatment." He didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. The meaning was clear. Jack left the office in a daze, the weight of the diagnosis bearing down on him. He drove back to the mansion on autopilot, his mind a storm of thoughts and emotions. Upon arriving home, he was immediately greeted by Emily and Michael, their faces alight with innocent smiles. "Uncle Jack," Emily exclaimed, hugging his legs. "Guess what? We made cookies with Mary today." Michael raised his arms, asking to be picked up. "Want to try one, Uncle Jack? They're so yummy." Jack forced a smile, lifting Michael while pulling Emily close. "Of course I do. Champs. Show me those delicious cookies." As the children dragged him toward the kitchen, chattering happily about their baking adventure, Jack felt a surge of emotion. How could he tell them? How could he leave them after everything they'd been through? The thought of causing Emily and Michael more pain was unbearable. That night, after the children were asleep, Jack locked himself in his office. He looked at Sarah's photo on his desk, wishing desperately she were there to advise and comfort him. "What do I do, Sarah?" he whispered to the picture. "How do I protect them from this?" It was then that Jack made a decision. He wouldn't tell anyone about the diagnosis, not yet anyway. He didn't want whatever time he had left to be overshadowed by pity and sadness. Instead, he would use it to secure the brightest, safest future possible for Emily and Michael. With renewed determination, Jack switched on his computer and got to work. He spent the entire night reviewing and expediting his plans for the children's reintegration with Mary and John. If his time was limited, he had to make sure the transition went smoothly and successfully. In the days that followed, Jack began his treatment in secret. He scheduled chemotherapy and radiation sessions for times when the children were at school or with Mary and John. On days when the side effects were especially brutal, he retreated to his room, claiming to be busy with an important project. Despite the exhaustion and pain, Jack forced himself to maintain a facade of normalcy. He continued attending the supervised visits, watching with a mix of joy and sadness as Emily and Michael's bond with their parents grew stronger each week. Meanwhile, Jack threw himself into launching the foundation. He worked tirelessly, often into the early hours, setting up the legal and financial framework. The Sarah Thornton Foundation, as he decided to call it, would be dedicated to helping vulnerable families, with a special focus on reunification programs. One afternoon, while reviewing some documents for the foundation, Jack had a sudden thought. He picked up the phone and called Elena Rodriguez, the investigator who had found Mary and John. "Elena," he said as soon as she answered, "I need your help again. I want you to find other families in situations similar to Emily and Michael, families separated by difficult circumstances, but with the potential for reunification." Surprised but intrigued, Elena agreed to start digging immediately. Jack knew these families would be the first to benefit from the foundation. a legacy he hoped would continue long after he was gone. As the days turned into weeks, Jack felt his body weakening, but his resolve only strengthened. He devoted every spare moment to preparing for Emily and Michael's future. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, Jack sat down with his trusted lawyer, Thomas, in his office. "I need you to draft some documents," Jack said, his voice tired but firm. "First, I want to set up a trust fund for Emily and Michael. It should cover all their future needs, education, healthcare, housing, everything." Thomas nodded, taking notes. "And about the children's guardianship?" he asked cautiously. Jack paused, the weight of the question pressing on his heart. "We'll prepare 2 scenarios. In the first, custody will transfer fully to Mary and John, assuming they remain stable and continue to make progress. In the second, if for some reason they can't take full responsibility, I want my sister Amanda to be named guardian, with Mary and John retaining extensive visitation rights." He paused again, taking a deep breath before continuing. "As for the foundation, I want to ensure it has the resources and leadership to keep operating no matter what happens to me. Let's establish a diverse, experienced board of directors." Thomas looked at Jack with concern. "Jack, these are quite comprehensive preparations. Is there something you're not telling me?" Jack forced a weary smile. "Just being cautious, Thomas. With everything that's happened in the past months, I've realized how important it is to be prepared for anything." In the weeks that followed, Jack divided his time between his secret medical treatments, caring for the children, overseeing Mary and John's reintegration, and his frenetic work on the foundation. Despite his best efforts to hide his condition, people around him began noticing changes. He'd lost weight, his skin was paler, and sometimes he simply ran out of energy. Emily, always perceptive, confronted him one night while he was tucking her into bed. "Uncle Jack," she said, her big brown eyes full of worry, "are you sick?" Jack felt his heart squeeze painfully. He hated lying to Emily, but he couldn't bear the thought of upsetting her. "I'm just a little tired, sweetheart," he replied, forcing a smile. "It's been a busy time at work." Emily studied him for a moment, clearly unconvinced. "Promise you'll be okay?" she asked in a small voice. Jack felt tears welling up. He pulled Emily into a tight hug, wishing he could make that promise. "I'll do my best, Emily," he whispered. "I'll always do my best for you and Michael." That night, after the children were asleep, Jack allowed himself a moment of vulnerability. Sitting alone in his office, he cried silently, the reality of his situation hitting him full force. He was dying, and no matter how he planned or worked, he couldn't shield Emily and Michael entirely from the pain ahead. Yet even in his darkest moment, Jack clung to hope. He thought of Mary and John's progress, of the love they clearly felt for their children. He thought of the foundation, which was already beginning to make a difference in other families' lives. And he thought of Emily and Michael, their resilience, their capacity for love despite everything they'd endured. With a deep breath, Jack dried his tears and got back to work. He didn't know how much time he had left, but he was determined to use every second building a better future for the children who had stolen his heart. Winter came in earnest, and Jack continued his silent battle. Each day was a struggle against fatigue and pain, but he refused to give up. He was present at every supervised visit, at every foundation meeting, at every precious moment with Emily and Michael. One cold December afternoon, as he watched the kids build a snowman in the garden with Mary and John, Jack felt a wave of calm wash over him. It wasn't resignation, but a peaceful acceptance. He had done everything he could to prepare Emily and Michael for the future. Now he could only hope the love they'd shared and the lessons they'd learned would be strong enough to carry the children through whatever lay ahead. "Uncle Jack!" Michael's excited voice pulled him from his thoughts. "Come see our snowman!" Jack smiled, ignoring the throbbing pain in his head. "I'm coming, champ," he replied, standing slowly. As he walked toward the laughter and joy in the garden, Jack made a silent promise. No matter what happened, he would keep fighting, for as long as he could, for Emily and Michael's future, and for the legacy of love and compassion Sarah had inspired. The chapter ends with Jack joining the children and their parents in the garden, his face lit by a genuine smile, as he helps place the hat on the snowman. For a moment, the pain and fear are forgotten, replaced by the simple joy of being present, of belonging to something greater than himself. And in that moment, despite everything, Jack feels truly alive. Winter had fully settled in, covering the Thornton property in a blanket of white and quiet. Jack watched the snowflakes drift gently outside his bedroom window. Feeling the weight of months of secrecy and solitary struggle, he knew the moment he both feared and longed for had arrived. It was time to share the truth with his newly formed family. With a deep sigh, Jack picked up his phone and sent a message to Mary and John, asking them to come to the mansion that afternoon for an important talk. Then he called Amanda, his sister, requesting her presence as well. He would need all the support he could get for what he was about to do. The hours that followed seemed to drag on. Jack spent the morning with Emily and Michael, his heart clenching at every laugh, every spontaneous hug. How would their lives change after today? How could he protect them from the pain he was about to cause? By afternoon, Jack gathered everyone in the living room. Emily and Michael sat on the carpet, absent-mindedly playing with toys. Mary and John sat on the couch, exchanging worried looks. Amanda stood near the fireplace, her tension evident in her posture. Jack drew a deep breath, feeling the weight of all eyes on him. "Thank you for coming," he began, his voice hoarse. "I have something important to share with you." He paused, searching for the right words. How did one explain something so devastating to children who had already been through so much? How did one prepare adults who were just beginning to rebuild their lives for another blow? "A few months ago," Jack continued, his voice wavering slightly, "I found out I'm sick. It's a brain tumor." The silence that followed was deafening. Jack saw shock and disbelief reflected in every face. Amanda brought a hand to her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. Mary gripped John's hand, both looking pale. Emily finally broke the silence. "Sick like Aunt Sarah?" she asked, her voice small and fearful. Jack felt his heart shatter. He knelt in front of Emily and Michael, taking their little hands in his own. "Not exactly like Aunt Sarah, sweetheart, but it is very serious. The doctors are doing their best to help me get better." Michael, eyes wide with confusion, asked, "But you will get better, right, Uncle Jack?" Jack swallowed hard, fighting back tears. "I'm doing everything I can, champ, but I need you to know that, no matter what happens, I love you both very much. You've brought so much joy to my life." It was then that the floodgates opened. Emily threw her arms around Jack, sobbing uncontrollably. Michael, not fully understanding but sensing the gravity of the situation, joined the embrace, clinging to Jack's shirt. Mary and John rose from the couch and came closer. Mary, tears streaming down her face, laid a comforting hand on Jack's shoulder. "We're here for you, Jack," she said, voice trembling. "Whatever you need." John nodded firmly. "You've done so much for us, for our kids. Now it's our turn to give back." Amanda stepped into the group, kneeling next to her brother. "Why didn't you tell us sooner, Jack?" she asked softly, not accusing but genuinely concerned. Jack looked at his sister, a sad smile on his lips. "I didn't want to be a burden. I wanted to make sure everyone was settled before things got harder." The hours that followed were intense and emotional. Together they cried, shared memories, and surprisingly, even laughed a little. Jack described his treatment, the challenges he was facing, and his determination to fight. Emily, her composure beyond her years, held Jack's hand and said with touching seriousness, "I'll take care of you, Uncle Jack, like you took care of me and Michael." Those simple words struck Jack deeply. He pulled Emily into a tight hug, marveling at the strength and love radiating from this small girl who had entered his life so unexpectedly. As the evening wore on, plans began to form. Mary and John offered to spend more time at the mansion, helping with the children and with Jack's care. Amanda promised to reorganize her schedule to be more present. "What about the foundation?" John asked, recalling the project Jack had mentioned in recent weeks. Jack smiled, grateful for the question. "The Sarah Foundation," he explained, "is something I've been working on for a while. It's an organization dedicated to helping vulnerable families. especially those in the process of reunification. He paused, looking at each face in the room. Actually, you were my inspiration. Seeing how our family came together, despite all the obstacles, I want to give others that chance too. Mary's eyes shone with emotion. How can we help? Jack felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. Your experience, your stories, they could be invaluable to other families in similar situations. If you're willing, I'd like you to serve on the Foundation's advisory board. John and Mary exchanged looks, a silent understanding passing between them. We'd be honored, John replied for both. In the days that followed, a new dynamic emerged at the Thornton mansion. Jack's revelation, instead of driving them apart, seemed to bind everyone closer. Mary and John began spending more time there, not just for scheduled visits, but to help with daily tasks and care for the children. Emily, in particular, took on the role of a little caregiver. She insisted on bringing Jack tea when he was tired, read him stories even if she stumbled over some words, and made sure to give him an extra hug every night before bed. Michael, though younger and less able to grasp the situation, showed his love in his own way. He often appeared in Jack's office with colorful drawings, proudly declaring, "Made this to make you happy, Uncle Jack." One afternoon, while Jack was resting in the sunroom, Emily approached with a photo album in her arms. "Can we look at this together, Uncle Jack?" she asked shyly. Jack smiled, making room for her on his armchair. "Of course, sweetheart." Together, they flipped through the album, filled with pictures from the past few months, photos of park outings, clumsy painting sessions, family dinners. In each picture, the love and joy were palpable. "You know, Emily," Jack said softly, "before you and Michael came into my life, I thought I knew what happiness was. But you showed me a completely different kind of joy." Emily looked at him with her big, serious eyes. "You made us really happy too, Uncle Jack. You gave us a family again." Her words echoed in Jack's mind in the days that followed. They gave him strength during his treatments, fueling his resolve to fight even harder. Meanwhile, the Sarah Foundation began to take shape. Even on days when he felt weak, Jack dedicated hours to the project. He made phone calls, organized meetings, and shared his vision with other business leaders and philanthropists. To his surprise, many responded enthusiastically. Jack's story of how he'd opened his heart and home to Emily and Michael touched people. Offers of financial and logistical support poured in. One day, while Jack was reviewing some foundation documents, Mary knocked gently on his office door. "May I come in?" she asked hesitantly. "Of course, Mary. What's on your mind?" Mary sat down across from him, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. "Jack, I wanted to thank you. I wanted to, not just for taking care of Emily and Michael when John and I couldn't, but for believing in us, for giving us a second chance." Jack smiled kindly. "You two did all the hard work, Mary. I just gave you an opportunity." Mary shook her head, tears glistening in her eyes. "It was more than that. You could have kept us out entirely, kept the kids to yourself. But instead, you helped us become the parents Emily and Michael deserve." She paused, taking a steadying breath. "And now, with your illness, Jack, I want you to know we'll do everything we can to honor your legacy, to raise Emily and Michael with the same love and compassion you've shown." Jack felt a knot in his throat. "Thank you, Mary. That means more to me than you could imagine." As the days turned into weeks, Jack continued his treatments with unwavering resolve. There were difficult days when pain and exhaustion were overwhelming, but there were also moments of unexpected joy and renewed strength. One such moment came when the Sarah Foundation launched its first pilot program, an initiative to support families in reunification, offering counseling, financial assistance, and educational resources. Jack was at the hospital for a treatment session when he received the news that the first family had been accepted into the program. Tears of joy ran down his cheeks as he read the details. A mother who had overcome drug addiction and was working to regain custody of her 2 children. "Look, Sarah," he whispered, gazing up at the sky through the hospital window. "We're making a difference. Your love is spreading." As winter gave way to spring, Jack faced each day with a mix of determination and acceptance. There were moments of deep frailty when the weight of his condition felt crushing, but the love of his family sustained him. Emily and Michael were constant sources of joy and motivation. Their laughter, spontaneous hugs, and unconditional love were the best medicine Jack could ask for. Mary and John, too, showed a level of dedication and growth that filled Jack with pride. One sunny April day, Jack had a particularly meaningful conversation with John. They were sitting in the garden, watching Emily and Michael play with a new set of soccer balls. "You know, John," Jack began, his voice calm yet firm, "when I first met you and Mary, I had my doubts. But seeing you now, how you've grown, how dedicated you've been to Emily and Michael, I'm genuinely impressed." John looked at Jack, emotion evident in his eyes. "It was all possible because of you, Jack. You gave us a chance when no one else would. You showed us what it means to be a real father." Jack smiled, feeling a mix of pride and nostalgia. "They're your children, John. I'm just the lucky uncle who got to be part of this journey." John placed a hand on Jack's shoulder. "You're much more than that, and you know it. To Emily and Michael, to Mary and me, you're family, and no matter what happens, you always will be." Those words stayed with Jack, warming his heart in the days that followed. They gave him strength during chemotherapy sessions and courage during sleepless nights of pain. Meanwhile, the Sarah Foundation continued to grow and thrive. More and more families were receiving help, their stories of hope and reunification rippling outward like waves in a pond. Even on days when Jack could barely get out of bed, he insisted on being updated about every new case and every small victory. During one such update, Amanda burst into Jack's room, her eyes shining with excitement. "Jack, Dr. Roberts called. He wants you at the hospital right away for some new scans." Jack's heart pounded. New scans could mean good or bad news. He steeled himself for both possibilities as Amanda helped him dress and drove him to the hospital. Once there, Jack underwent another round of tests. The hours of waiting felt endless. Emily and Michael had insisted on coming too, and were now sitting in the waiting room with Mary and John, everyone anxiously awaiting the results. Finally, Dr. Roberts appeared, a cautious smile on his face. "Jack," he began, "I have good news. The tumor is responding exceptionally well to treatment. It's shrinking at a rate we didn't expect to see so soon." The room erupted in exclamations of joy and relief. Emily and Michael jumped out of their seats, running to hug Jack. Mary and John exchanged hopeful looks, tears of happiness in their eyes. Jack, overwhelmed by emotion, could only nod his thanks to the doctor. He pulled Emily and Michael close, feeling the warmth of their small bodies and the vibration of their gleeful laughter. "This doesn't mean the battle is over," Dr. Roberts cautioned gently. "We still have a long way to go. But it's a very positive sign, Jack. You're fighting and you're winning." That night, back at the mansion, a small celebration took place. The kitchen was filled with laughter and the clamor of cheerful voices as everyone helped prepare a special dinner. Emily insisted on baking Jack's favorite chocolate cake, with Mary's patient help. Michael ran around excitedly, placing his colorful drawings all over the house, each one proclaiming, "Uncle Jack is the best." Sitting at the head of the dining table, Jack observed the scene with a heart brimming with emotion. He saw Emily's pride when she presented the slightly crooked but lovingly made cake. He saw Mary and John's growing confidence as they interacted with the kids, truly comfortable in their parental roles. He saw the relieved smile on Amanda's face, finally able to relax a bit after months of constant worry. When everyone was seated, Jack raised his glass of juice, alcohol was still off limits due to treatment, and cleared his throat. "I'd like to make a toast," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "To this amazing family we've built together, to Emily and Michael, who taught me the true meaning of unconditional love, to Mary and John, who proved that love and determination can overcome any obstacle, to Amanda, the best sister a man could ask for, and to Sarah," he paused, glancing up at the sky through the window, "whose love continues to guide and inspire us." A moment of emotional silence followed, before everyone lifted their glasses in response. "To family," they said in unison. Later, once the children were tucked into bed, Jack found himself alone in the garden, gazing at the stars. He thought about everything that had happened in recent months, the pain, the fear, and also the incredible joy and love he had experienced. "Thank you, Sarah," he whispered into the night, "for showing me this path, for giving me this family. I promise I'll keep fighting, keep loving, keep making a difference for as long as I can." A gentle breeze brushed against his face, almost like a comforting caress. Jack smiled, feeling a peace he hadn't felt in a long time. The future was still uncertain, and his battle against cancer was far from over. But in that moment, surrounded by the love of an unlikely family and strengthened by Sarah's memory, Jack knew he could face anything. The chapter ends with Jack returning inside the house, greeted by the warm smiles of Mary, John, and Amanda. As they settle in for a late-night cup of tea, making plans for the future and sharing stories, there is a palpable sense of hope in the air. Jack's journey, from a lonely businessman to a man surrounded by love and purpose, has reached a turning point, and although challenges still lie ahead, he will face them with the strength of a united family by his side. 6 months passed since that hopeful night at the Thornton mansion. Summer came and went, giving way to a golden autumn. The leaves on the trees around the Thornton estate had turned vibrant hues, creating a warm-toned carpet on the manicured lawn. Jack was sitting in his office, gazing out the window, when the phone rang. It was Dr. Roberts. With his heart pounding, Jack answered. "Jack," the doctor's voice came through the line, "I have great news. Your latest scans, you're in remission." The world seemed to pause for a moment. Jack felt tears of relief and joy rolling down his cheeks. "Thank you, doctor," he managed, his voice choked with emotion. "Thank you for everything." In the days that followed, word spread quickly. The Thornton mansion became a whirlwind of activity as a grand celebration was planned. Jack insisted it not just be a party for him, but a celebration of all the lives that had been touched and transformed over the past months. On the day of the party, the mansion's garden was unrecognizable. Bright tents were set up, tables laden with food dotted the lawn, and balloons swayed in the gentle autumn breeze. People from every part of Jack's life were there. Company executives, the medical staff who had treated him, families helped by the Sarah Foundation. At the heart of it all were Emily and Michael, running back and forth with radiant smiles. They had blossomed in recent months, their love for Jack growing alongside their renewed bond with Mary and John. "Uncle Jack! Uncle Jack!" Emily called, running toward him with Michael in tow. "Look at how many people came to see you!" Jack knelt, opening his arms to hug both children. "It's amazing, isn't it?" he said, smiling. "But you know what's even more amazing? Seeing you two so happy." Mary and John approached, their faces shining with pride and gratitude. "Jack," Mary began, "we don't even know how to—" Jack raised a gentle hand to interrupt. "There's no need to say anything. Seeing you four together, happy and healthy, is all I could ever ask for." The afternoon wore on with emotional speeches, laughter, and many joyful tears. Jack watched it all with a deep sense of gratitude. In a quiet moment, he found himself reflecting on the remarkable journey that had brought him here. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with pink and gold, Jack asked for everyone's attention. Standing on a small makeshift stage, he looked out at the sea of faces, his family, friends, colleagues, and those whose lives he had touched through the Sarah Foundation. "A little more than a year ago," he began, his voice clear and steady, "I was a different man. I thought I knew what success was, what mattered in life. Then in a single day, everything changed." He paused, his eyes finding Emily and Michael in the crowd. "Two incredible children entered my life and turned my world upside down. They taught me about unconditional love, about second chances, about the true strength of family." Jack continued, recounting the past months, the challenges, the joys, the lessons learned. He spoke about Sarah, about her legacy of love and compassion that had inspired the foundation. "Today," he concluded, "I want to announce that I will be dedicating the rest of my life to the Sarah Foundation. We will continue helping families, building bridges, offering second chances, because if I've learned anything on this journey, it's that love has the power to heal, to transform, and to create miracles." The crowd erupted in applause, many in tears. Emily and Michael dashed onto the stage, throwing themselves into Jack's arms. Mary and John joined them, forming a group hug that perfectly symbolized the new family they had become. A few weeks later, on a sunny autumn Saturday, Jack, Mary, John, Emily, and Michael decided to have a picnic at the local park. As Jack spread a checkered blanket on the grass, he watched the children laughing and running, chasing a brightly colored kite that John had brought. Mary sat down beside Jack, offering him a sandwich. "You know," she said softly, "sometimes I still feel like this is a dream. A year ago, I hardly dared to hope we could ever be a family again." Jack smiled, taking the sandwich. "Life has a funny way of surprising us, doesn't it?" They sat in companionable silence, watching John teach Emily and Michael how to fly the kite. A gentle breeze made it dance against the blue sky, its bright colors contrasting with the golden leaves around them. "Jack," Mary said, her voice thick with emotion, "you will always be part of this family. For Emily and Michael, you're as much a father as John and I are. I hope you know that." Jack felt a tightness in his throat. "Thank you, Mary, all of you. You've given me a new purpose, a new life." At that moment, Emily ran over, her hair flying in the wind. "Come on, Uncle Jack," she cried, tugging his hand. "Come fly the kite with us." Smiling, Jack stood and allowed Emily to lead him toward John and Michael. Together, the five of them held the kite's string, their laughter blending with the rustling of the autumn leaves. And there, in that park beneath a clear blue autumn sky, was living proof of Sarah's legacy, a family united by love, compassion, and a faith in second chances. Jack looked at the kite soaring overhead and felt a profound peace. He knew that no matter what the future held, the love they had built together would guide them through any storm.